Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Iran pushes back against renewed U.S. sanctions following major concern from Israel. The White House calls out more fake news regarding their statements on the Middle East, and Israelis celebrate as the Jewish state comes one step closer to legalizing marijuana. I'm Natasha Kirchuk here with the latest news in Israel. Reports are coming out today that two top Israeli intelligence officials have held a number of secret talks with senior American security advisors since Donald Trump was elected in November. According to the Haaretz newspaper, the second such meeting was held 2 weeks ago. The Israelis are being identified as the chief of the Masada intelligence agency Yossi Cohen and acting national security advisor Yaakov Nagel, who reportedly met with Trump's national security advisor Michael Flynn, as well as other unnamed aides. The two sides are believed to have held talks 2 days before Trump's January inauguration, as well as sometime during the preceding month to discuss the forming of common policies on a number of hot-button topics, including the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Syria's civil war, and Iran. Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, is also thought to have sat in on at least one of the meetings. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to hold his own direct summit with the new president when the two leaders meet at the White House on February 15th. One thing Netanyahu's bound to be pleased by is Washington's imposition of fresh sanctions on Iran, following the Islamic Republic's violation of UN Security Council Resolution 2231 with its recent ballistic missile test, which Israel strongly condemned. Iran is openly defying new U.S. sanctions on its missile program and ratcheting up tensions between Tehran and Washington even more by holding another missile drill. This as a top Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander is vowing to deploy the missiles if the rogue state feels its own security is under threat. Despite sanctions and Iran being put on notice by the U.S. in the wake of Iran's recent ballistic missile test, the head of the Revolutionary Guard's aerospace unit announced that if even the smallest of missteps from its enemies is seen, roaring missiles will fall on their heads. The statement came as the elite forces website claimed another military test of Iran's missile and radar systems was being held in the Semnan province. In further dismissal of the sanctions, the commander of Iran's ground forces says the Islamic Republic has been hearing such threats since 1979, and that his nation's defense capability and offensive prowess would make America or any other enemy regret any incursion. Iranian state news agencies reported that homemade missile systems, radars, command and control centers, and cyber warfare systems were all showcased during last week's drill. During his election campaign, Trump vowed to stop Iran's missile program, which is one of the largest in the Middle East. While the Islamic Republic has test-fired several ballistic missiles since the nuclear deal in 2015, its most recent was the first since Trump entered the White House. At Israel's request, Washington convened an emergency session of the UN Security Council to discuss the matter, which the Jewish state sees as a threat to its very existence based on previous threats from Iran. Last Thursday, the White House came under the spotlight for reportedly coming out against the expansion of Israeli settlements by stating that the enterprise, quote, may not be helpful. But one media outlet that is very close to the Trump administration is insisting the statement was completely misinterpreted. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more.
Yes, so the White House's statements came out just after Prime Minister Netanyahu's announcement that he would help create the first officially sanctioned settlement in the West Bank since the early mid-90s, and that's to rehouse the residents of Amona. The mainstream media outlets reported that the White House's statements were basically against settlements. So, you have Breitbart News, whose former executive chairman Steve Bannon is now President Trump's chief strategist, and he came out and he called the media's reaction more fake news.
The statement said that while the White House doesn't see existing settlements as hampering peace with the Palestinians,
It does recognize that expansion of existing settlements beyond their current borders may not be helpful in achieving that goal. Breitbart insists that the new president is signaling his intent to back a permanent Jewish presence in eastern Jerusalem and Judean Samaria, with or without a Palestinian state. PLO officials are, of course, not only slamming Netanyahu's proposal, but also indicating that Trump may be more accommodating towards such projects than his Democratic predecessor, Barack Obama.
So the thing is, the messages that are being sent is that the U.S. is shifting, is changing from being a patron and protector of Israel to being a partner in crime with Israel. Settlements are, by international law, are a war crime, and anybody who aids and abets a war crime is guilty of being complicit in the crime.
The Palestinians want all of the West Bank and Gaza Strip for any future independent state, with its capital in East Jerusalem.
As the new administration of U.S. President Donald Trump continues to change policy in the Middle East, it can be hard to keep track of what's happening. Joining us today is Dr. Ephraim Kam, a senior researcher at the Israel Institute for National Security Studies, to keep us on track. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, too.
All right, so let's begin with the Palestinian issue. President Trump's aides have recently publicized a suspension of talks with the PA until there is actually a meeting between Trump and Netanyahu. Now, what do you think the Palestinian authorities, how do you think the Palestinian authorities are going to respond to that? What are they thinking in response to that move?
I'm quite sure the Palestinians are very much disturbed and concerned about the new administration in the U.S. Their feeling is that he's not going to take the same track like his predecessor, like President Obama. They are afraid that he's going to give much more credit to Israel, and he's not going to play the same game that Obama played, which was in their favor. They want a different kind of game. I'm not sure that they're going to be mistaken. I think that sometime in the future, Trump will understand that he has to give something to the Palestinians. But at this moment, their feeling is that he's giving all the credit to the Netanyahu government and not to the Palestinians.
Now, there's another country in the Middle East that is also deeply concerned about American policy, and that would be Iran, which you are very much an expert on. Now, Trump has just introduced renewed sanctions against Iran following the testing of ballistic missiles, and Iran has already made threats to strike if there's any further pressure. What do you think the outcome will be of this move?
First of all, the Iranians are also very much concerned about the new administration in Washington. Their feeling is that he is playing a different game with different cards compared to the former one, that he is willing to exert much more pressure on Iran, and he is going to make sure that Iran will not continue with this former policy that they have conducted until now. Their feeling is that he is going to be much tougher than Obama was, that he is not looking for some kind of rapprochement with Iran. He's going to impose pressure on Iran in various fields with regard to the nuclear issue, with regard to the ballistic missiles, and with regard to their use of terrorism.
Now, do you think that the Trump administration is going about this issue in the right way right now?
He has no experience, and I don't know what is the right. I think he's doing one thing much better than Obama did. He is not playing the same game. He's playing a different game, and Iranians are concerned. I think it's good that the Iranians will be concerned about the American administration. They were not concerned about Obama. They are now much concerned about Trump.
Now, we're seeing more and more threats coming from Iran, not only towards the United States, but to Israel more specifically. Should Israel be concerned about the threat that Iran poses?
Israel is concerned. It's not a matter of should be concerned, it is concerned. From the Israeli viewpoint, most of the experts in Israel are saying or suggesting that Iran is a number one threat for Israel.
But do you think Israel is more or less concerned than before?
Maybe less, because Obama is playing a different game, and because Obama is willing to exert pressures on Iran. So I think
you mean Trump?
Trump, I mean, of course. For Israel, it is much better. How much he's going to do it in the future, we have to wait and see.
Right. Well, the White House is now reporting, and I want to turn to a different issue that is also related to the White House, but, settlements probably aren't helping towards a two-state solution. That is a statement that came out from the White House on Thursday. Now, many people claim that this is a White House in some way opposing Israel's expansion of settlements in the West Bank. Do you think there is an actual shift that we're seeing in how the U.S. views and how the Trump administration views settlement expansion?
Depends who you are, because some Israelis, especially those who belong to the right-wing parties, believe that this is the right time to build new settlements in the West Bank because the Trump administration will accept it. I'm not sure about that. And last week he gave a hint that he's not going to accept it. But some Israelis believe that he's going to do that, to accept the fact that Israel has the right to expand the territories in the West Bank under its control.
Is this in the best interest of Israel to be doing that right now?
They're trying Trump. They don't understand what is the limit of his willingness to cooperate with Israel on the Palestinian issue. We don't know. For the time being, I'm not sure that he knows. He's trying, so we have to wait and see until he learns his job, until he understands what are the limitations, what are the pros and cons, and I think we should be better equipped to give a good answer sometime in the future.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
And we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Correctly.
All right, it looks like the Palestinians have a new ally, this time from Central America. The Sandinista government of Nicaragua is now speaking out on behalf of the Palestinians. The Central American country is headed by President Daniel Ortega, who used to be an ally of the late boss of the PLO, Yasser Arafat. Managua has long supported Palestinian statehood and the Palestinian right to a full membership in the United Nations. At a roundtable meeting in the Nicaraguan capital, Foreign Minister Denis Moncada not only underscored his nation's solidarity with Ramallah, but also the terrorist-run enclave of Gaza. Es justo
y necesario poner fin a la ocupación israelí en territorio palestino, exigir el cese inmediato de la construcción de asentamientos, poner fin al bloqueo de Gaza y liberar a los prisioneros palestinos.
He also took the opportunity to strike out against the traditional protection of Israel at the UN Security Council by the United States.
Es inadmisible la impunidad del gobierno de Israel y el abuso del veto del Consejo de Seguridad que prolongan el sufrimiento del pueblo palestino en los territorios ocupados y de los más de 5 millones de refugiados palestinos en el mundo a quienes expresamos nuestra solidaridad.
Today, Nicaragua doesn't hold any diplomatic relations with Israel. Managua suspended ties in 2010 over the Gaza flotilla raid when 10 Turkish activists were killed after violently attacking Israeli commandos who were trying to stop them from breaching Israel's naval blockade on the Gaza Strip. Hamas is reportedly scoffing at Jerusalem's latest offer to secure the release of an Israeli that is being held captive in Gaza. Israel is believed to have agreed to exchange a mentally ill Hamas member being held in the Jewish state for Ethiopian-Israeli civilian Avraham Mengitsu, who is also said to be suffering psychological issues. Mengitsu is likely to have crossed into the Palestinian territory on his own volition in September of 2014. And has been held captive there ever since. But the Islamist terrorist rulers of the Strip are reportedly dismissing any such small-scale deals and are instead demanding a single all-encompassing prisoner swap. Hamas wants hundreds of Palestinians freed from Israeli jails in return for Mengitsu and an Arab-Israeli Bedouin who also entered Gaza on his own, as well as the remains of 2 IDF servicemen. Israel believes both Oron Shaul and Hadar Goldin fell in defense of the Jewish state during the last Gaza war in 2014, although Hamas cruelly claims Shaul is alive and also being held in captivity. Even though Egypt isn't willing to serve as a mediator, the country's reportedly been encouraging Hamas to negotiate with Israel and hosted a delegation of officials from Gaza in Cairo over the weekend. Now, you may not know it, but the Islamic State's destruction of Christian communities in the Middle East did not begin with the Arab Spring and, in fact, is well entrenched in the troubled history of the region. Riding Storm is a novel that transpires within the Christian community of pre-state Palestine during the horrors of the Arab Revolt in 1936, and ILTV's Steve Leibowitz sat down with the authors of the book to find out what it has to offer.
Yes, okay. It started as you said, I came to Akko with my wife in order to write a story about a famous lady at the time. Her name was Raymonda Tawil. And while we were sitting with our sources in Akko, listening to the stories of her childhood, we understood that it should be a novel and not just another story for a newspaper. So we started to investigate the era, the personalities that were living during the British mandate in Palestine, in Western Galilee, in Akko, in the villages around, and we discovered fantastic stories about what happened those days, and especially a remarkable lady, the grandmother of Suha Arafat, the mother of Raimonda Tawil, that she was a remarkable lady, and the book is inspired by her character and what happened to her, that symbolized the fate of the Christians. She was a Christian lady. What was particular with the Christian communities in Western Galilee, which is also relevant to Syria and Lebanon and the Levant in general, the desire to reform the communities, the clash between East and West, and the environment of Muslim radicalism and Palestinian terrorism, all combined together in one story.
Now, there are characters that people will be able to recognize as real characters, even though it's a novel.
Yes, it's a novel. Well, some of our readers recognized Holiday, the hero of the book, as the mother of Raimonda Tawil. Her name was Christmas, and I'm not going to argue with them.
So the period that you are dealing with was certainly a very difficult period for the Christians in Palestine and also in the Middle East, was it not?
Exactly, correct. It was the beginning. We can see the seeds of their catastrophe in our era now, because they have to struggle against the mosque, against the instigations against them in the mosques. Actually, the beginning of ISIS started long ago in the mixed communities of Muslims and Christians, and also Palestinian terrorism started those days, and also it was linked to the mosque, and so they were in a very difficult situation. So they tried to link themselves with Arab nationalism to be protected against radical Islam. But now they lost this pillar of support they had until now.
Well, I don't want to ruin the book for people. It's called Riding Storm by Aviva Tomer Enbari, that's your wife, and Pinchas Enbari. It's now in English, and much luck to you with this book.
Thank you so much.
Israel has long been a world leader when it comes to the development and use of medical marijuana. But lately there's been a growing call across the country for cannabis to be legalized purely for recreational purposes. That's the message thousands of Israelis had for the government over the weekend at one of the largest pro-marijuana demonstrations ever seen in Israeli history. While chanting "The people demand legal cannabis," activists took to the streets of Tel Aviv on Saturday. Activists say they back the recommendation of Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan to decriminalize marijuana for private use, but want the government to go even farther by totally legalizing it. They'd also like to see the expunging of all criminal records for anyone who's already been convicted of related offenses, and government regulation of the cannabis market like there is in several U.S. states, so the industry isn't at the mercy of criminal entities. Several popular Israeli musicians performed at the Rabin Square rally, which was also attended by lawmakers from both the ruling government coalition and the opposition parties. There's an old joke that Moses wandered the desert for 40 years to lead the people of Israel to the only state in the Middle East that didn't have any oil. Well, that might have been true right up until the discovery of some of the largest offshore reserves the world's ever seen that are now bringing in a fortune. Aaron, tell us the good news.
Well, it starts with Israeli Energy Minister Yuval Steinitz, who reported recently that the natural gas sales in 2016 amounted to an impressive $800 million.
Wow. Wow.
And we're just getting started because the Jewish state is now advancing a major deal to build a pipeline of so-called black gold to Italy, Greece, and Cyprus. A delegation headed by Turkey's energy ministry is also coming to Israel to finalize details on another pipeline to his country. Steinitz says the Israeli gas exports to Europe and elsewhere in the region will provide a huge diplomatic lever as well as a tremendous economic gain for the citizens of Israel in the future. He also says he has big plans to reduce Israeli energy dependence on coal from the 40% it is today to just 10%, so that one day the nation's needs will be met almost entirely by natural gas reservoirs in the Mediterranean.
All right, history lovers, we have this amazing archaeological update for you. Starting today, new excavations are getting underway at Masada for the first time in more than a decade. The month-long Israeli expedition is aimed at parts of the legendary mountaintop Jewish fortress that have never before been explored, particularly places where Jewish rebels fighting the Roman Empire once lived. According to the great historical scholar Josephus Flavius, 4 years after Jerusalem fell and the first temple was destroyed in the year 70, to avoid becoming slaves, the last of the rebels and their families committed mass suicide on the eve of being stormed by Roman forces. The Judean desert stronghold was originally constructed as a winter palace for King Herod, who was also busy building the Temple Mount complex in Jerusalem. Its impressive ruins are one of the most visited tourist sites in Israel. The UN's cultural body UNESCO registered Masada as a World Heritage Site in 2001, based on its majestic beauty and importance as a symbol of the ancient kingdom of Israel. The first modern excavations began in 1963 by the former IDF Chief of Staff and archaeologist Yigal Yadin, who intentionally left some areas untouched. He wanted future archaeologists to have more to discover, and today we can hardly wait to see what treasures are unearthed this time around. The Super Bowl is almost upon us, and excitement in Israel is gearing up over the championship in the U.S. that's being held in Houston tomorrow. That's not just because two really great teams are contending for the title, it's also because both the New England Patriots and the Atlanta Falcons have Jewish owners with close connections to Israel. Robert Kraft is the owner of the New England Patriots, and he's hoping to score his 5th championship since taking over the team's franchise in 1994. And Arthur Blank is ardently hoping to bring home his first championship with the Atlanta Falcons that he bought in 2002. While both men are now in the Super Bowl spotlight for their talented football teams, beyond their victories on the field, both are renowned for using their wealth and influence to help others. Kraft has given more than $100 million to Jewish and Israeli causes for years. He was raised in an observant Jewish home in Brookline, Massachusetts, where his father was a leader at the local synagogue and reportedly hoped his son would become a rabbi. Arthur Blank is the co-founder of Home Depot, who's actually signed a pledge to give away at least half of his wealth to charity. The New York-born Blank has been the benefactor of many great causes, including the Jewish Agency for Israel, the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta, and a $7 million gift to a pediatric charity care program in Denver. You might be surprised to know that 10 of today's National Football League teams have Jewish owners. The last time two faced off at the Super Bowl was in 2012, when the New York Giants, co-owned by Steve Tisch, defeated Kraft's Patriots 21-17. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. They say you should stay out of trouble, but the trouble with trouble is that it usually starts out as fun. So today's word is tzarot, which means trouble in Hebrew. Tzarot can mean a few different things depending on the context. You could say nichnas li tzarot, meaning I got into trouble. You could say hu tzarot, meaning he's trouble or even evil. And you could also use tzarot to mean misfortune or sorrow. But if you think about it, tzarot doesn't always have to mean something negative. Just try to look at your tzarot as individual opportunities to overcome difficulties and grow as a person. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight should be fair to partly cloudy but cold with a low of 47 or 8 degrees Celsius. You can expect a slight rise in temperatures tomorrow to a high of 66 or 19 degrees Celsius, and the sky should be mostly sunny. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.75 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching and see you tonight.